to the Life and Listings podcast. I have Ed here. Hey, Ed, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Jennifer, nice to see you. How are you?
Pretty good. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. I know you have a wide array of experience, but who are you and what are you doing?
Who am I and why am I here? All right. So I'm Ed Mathews with Clark Street Capital. I am a real estate investor. We focus on multifamily. And in fact, we help C-level executives passively invest in real estate. So having been one myself, I know that working 80 hours a week and then having a family and wanting to have fun on top of all that, there's only a finite amount of hours in the week. And, we as human beings require sleep. So that's what we focus on is, how do we help folks that used to be me and how do we help them invest in real estate as well? I spent about 24, almost 25 years working for Silicon Valley companies. Most of them you've never heard of, except probably the last one. Given the audience, I worked at DocuSign for a handful of years, helping them manage some of their strategic accounts and kind of rode that right into their IPO, which was a lot of fun. And back in 2018, I went full-time and kind of converted what was a side hustle, Clark Street Properties, into Clark Street Capital, which is the full-time version of that company. And we've been, running real hard for, it's got to be 6 years earlier this month, as a matter of fact. So a whole lot of fun.
Amazing. Don't you love how some of our, let's call it side hustles, turn into something much bigger than we ever imagined?
Yeah. And, I would love to tell you that I had like this grand plan when I started to invest, but really, it was I got a bug, right? I read Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it took me that was in '08, and it took me the better part of 2.5, 3 years to just get the courage to pull the trigger on a deal, and I can tell you all about that if you like. But the fact is that once I did the first deal, I realized that it's not as scary and not as difficult as I had made it in my head.
Yeah.
And immediately got the bug and started flipping houses and taking the capital and buying more small multis. And we did that for, like 7 years. And then I got to a point in my career where I was traveling 150 plus nights a year. And I had 2 little girls at home who were starting to become young ladies and, growing from little kids to teenagers. And I was missing everything. I was missing choral concerts and parent-teacher meetings and soccer games and swim meets and, everything in between. And it was a lot of good stuff that I missed and I got tired of missing it. So fortunately, that little portfolio side hustle thing turned into revenue that basically eclipsed where I was making in corporate America. And I just happened to coincide basically at the same time where I was kind of burning out on my job and needed some time freedom. And so I resigned, and it's been a whole lot of fun ever since.
That must have been so exciting and so terrifying at the same time.
more the latter than the former, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was terrifying, and then it was exciting. But the first couple of months were like, oh my God, what have I done? And I had that conversation with a handful of people, because I left DocuSign 4 months before they went public. So I had are you out of your ever-loving mind?
Yeah.
Conversation about a dozen times from family members and mentors and colleagues and my answer was the same. Yes, probably, but I'm still going to do it. And so,
I bet you there's so many of our listeners that have had the same response. I mean, I know my family, when I originally told them, hey, I'm going to drop out of college and I'm going to get my real estate license, they were like, what do you even think you are doing? Yeah, you're going to do what? And then even when I started stats, I think it was the same general response. Like, what exactly are you trying to do? And what do you do? And like, I'm trying to build this operations management company. They're like, I don't get it. I'm like, you'll get it eventually. Oh, God. Well, I mean,
here's the thing. You as the other person, you don't have to get it. Only I have to get it.
Yeah.
And so
we're
going to make this work. I'm burning the boats and we're going to do this. Let's go.
Right? Yeah. Amazing. Well, I know we have a couple topics that I want to dive into, but I kind of want to dive into, you were burning out and you had this side hustle. Like, was there a tipping point that you were like, you know what, I'm going to do it? Did you save up enough money or did you have some good deals going? Like, what made you finally pull that trigger 4 months before DocuSign went public?
So, so having spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley, I had been very lucky to go through a couple of IPOs. So we had, you know, a little bit of a cushion. And I was standing in, I remember it vividly sitting here telling the story I'm about to tell. So I was standing in a conference room and I was watching Keith Kroc, who is of the pantheon of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. He's on that list, right? He is, you know, just a tremendously successful, inspirational, charismatic, smart superstar of a CEO and chairman. And I was watching him with about 2,000 of my colleagues, you know, the end of year kind of celebration, like we had another great year and next year we're going public and it's going to be great. And, you know, he was doing what I like to refer to as his laser light show. And he was a little lighting the room up. And I was standing there like, he's right. Totally right. I totally buy into what he's doing, but I just can't do this anymore. I can't. And so like I went home and had a conversation with my wife, Patricia, and, you know, we went back and forth on it for, you know, about 2 weeks and woke up January 2nd and said, I'm done. I can't do it. Called my boss and said, I'm giving you 30 days notice. I'm out. And that was the first, are you out of your ever loving mind? I had, but you know, I mean, it was the right thing to do for me and my family. And I was confident that whatever I was going to make on the IPO, I could make doing this. And so, you know, money stopped being a consideration and it came down to, you know, what's the right thing to do for me? What's the right thing to do for my kids and for my wife? And, you know, the good news is we all still like each other and did back then. And I was really committed to making sure that continued because I'm kind of fond of them and I'm pretty sure they're fond of me. So, you know, we just wanted to, you know, I didn't want that to, you know, I needed to get off the crazy train. And so this was my opportunity and I took it and I don't regret it in any way, shape or form.
Amazing. Amazing. I mean, sometimes you just have to give it a try and see how it goes. And now you're helping other people do the same thing. I mean, how is that going and what kind of response have you received from your clients?
So I always tell people, you know, when I speak or I appear on a podcast like yours, that I'm a cheap date, right? I will spend 15, 20, 30 minutes over a cup of coffee with pretty much anybody and I'll answer every question you got. And, you know, some of them I know the answers and some of them I happen to know somebody that knows the answer and I'll connect to, right? And so I thoroughly enjoy that. It warms my soul, right? Because I've been really, really lucky to have met and worked with several people who have become mentors and coaches in my world. And, you know, they wanted nothing other than to see me succeed. And so and they didn't want anything from me. They didn't want me to pay them or, you know, anything like that. So the way that I pay them is I pay it forward. And I do that for other people. And, you know, I have this belief that we're all reading the same book and I may be a few chapters ahead of you and you may be a few chapters ahead of somebody else. And if I can help you skip the chapters where I did all the dumb stuff I did over the last 10, 12 years and just jump into my chapter, that's mission accomplished. And that's a good thing. So I'm happy to do that.
That is so great. And I feel like I see that all the time where I've made so many mistakes and I didn't have a coach right off the bat or even a mentor to look up to. And I tried all these things and failed. And now I love telling people that are just getting started, just try this program or don't do that. And they're like, you just saved me thousands of dollars. I'm like, yeah, I did. Don't do that. Oh my God.
Yeah, I meet people all the time.
Like, well, and one of the things we want to talk about today, because I think just our listeners really want.
And it's, you know, I'm thinking about signing up for this, you know, $1 course. You know, what do you think?
Yeah.
It's like, first thing you do is don't do that. Right.
Yeah.
You know, because the fact is that you can hire a mentor. And what I mean by hire is buy him a nice cup of coffee and, you know, we'll help. Right. And the thing is that, and I learned this through some pain and some success. The best way to learn is to go dive in head first, you know, manage what you can manage, control what you can control, and then buy something and make it work. Right. And so there are plenty of books, there's plenty of YouTube videos, there's podcasts like yours, podcasts like mine. There are, you know, hundreds and I would submit thousands of people that are giving away information for free if you'll just slow down to pay attention and figure out, okay, of these people who are telling me the truth, okay, there's these four over here. I'm going to pay attention to these four people,
Yeah.
and then drink up every single thing they drop on social media. You stand a very good chance of being pretty successful, right? And success begets success too, right? Once you learn how to do something, you're not going to forget how to do it. You just build on that.
Yeah. How do you recommend that people kind of weed out? Because I see very often that, we go to a conference or you're in a Facebook group and someone's like, oh, this is the way you do it. And it's actually not even really people that are actually doing it. They're just trying to make money. So how do you weed through the real good information and the, let's say, pseudo fake information out there?
So one way to do it, and something that I've discovered over the years, is that 95% of the people who buy those big trainings, 95% of them never buy one single property, right? So the first thing I would do is if I'm in a Facebook group and you've got, a self-proclaimed guru talking about all these things, first thing I'd do is start asking, okay, how many properties did you buy and were they successful, right? And what would you do different if you know? And I would start digging into the people that follow that person or people, right? And, as you start to build sense of confidence around a person, then, that trust is probably earned, and start paying attention to them. I mean, it's as simple as, I liken social media to a dinner party, right? You want to go, and when you walk in the door and you tell somebody you're a broker or you're a realtor or you're a real estate investor, almost instantly you become one of the more interesting people in that room, right? Just because it's a cool topic. It's fun. It's an adventure of a career choice. And the person you want to be is the interesting person, right? You want to be the person that says, okay, here's a problem I have. Here's how I solved it. Here's an opportunity I have. Here's how I'm taking advantage of it. And share that information and share that information and share that information. Those are the people you want to congregate towards. You don't want to congregate towards the creepy guy in the corner that says, hey, want to buy my stuff? Right?
Oh, no.
Right?
Yeah, that's totally true.
Right. So that's the thing that I tend to pay attention to, is the givers, the people that are out there talking about, what they do, how they do it well. How do we create operational excellence? How do we build a team? How do we scale that team? How do we scale that operation? Those are the people I tend to pay attention to because, first off, the fact that they can talk about it in great depth gives them credibility in my mind that they know what they're talking about. And then I'll dive in a little deeper and look at the comments and look at, do they have fans or do they have people that, are using what they're putting out there?
Right.
If they have fans, I'm not interested. But if they have people that say, hey, I tried this and it worked, or hey, I tried this and it didn't work quite as well, and then there's an interchange between, okay, what'd you do? How do you fix that? Those are people that I tend to pay attention to.
Yeah. Okay. That's great, because I see so many times with our clients that they're like, I went to a conference and I paid all this money for this thing. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what this thing is. And that I'm very concerned if I haven't heard of this tool or this service, because I usually test out everything or do a lot of research.
And you're talking to a guy who, I'm one of those, shiny object on Facebook for $9.95. I'll buy that, right? And then I put a $37 thing behind it, and then I usually stop, right? Because I want to see if that's any good. But, you could then go buy the $197 thing, the $497 thing, and attend this conference, and that's $19.97, and pretty soon you've spent $10,000 on stuff that may or may not work, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be careful, right? You've got to, buyer beware is a real thing, caveat emptor, and you got to buy slow and really go through the material and see if it's worthwhile. And if it's worthwhile, then continue to follow them and continue to try to learn from them. But I've met so many people that have said, I spent $15,000 on a course. I'm like, oh my God, that's a down payment on a duplex. Right? Why would you do that? Just go buy a duplex.
Yeah. I love how yours is like, you're looking at it as down payments on your next investment property. I love how you're looking at that. It's so funny. Well,
it's funny. I look at everything like that, to be honest. right? Do I
Yeah.
want a car or do I want a four family?
Yeah. I mean, it totally makes sense. I mean, my husband might have conversations like that all the time. Like, do we really want to do that or do we want to invest it here? I mean, our worlds have shifted with real estate much different than before.
Rather buy
So Ed, let's pivot a little bit because
sure.
yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about just team building and managing a team. You've worn many hats. So I kind of want to see what kind of tips you can give some of our broker owners or team leads if they are building a team or they're scaling. What kind of tips can we give them?
So first and foremost, be crystal clear on the jobs. So, and what I mean by that is exactly, what does your team look like from an organizational perspective, and explicitly who does what with whom on that team, right? If you have a social media manager, what is she responsible for? If you have somebody that edits your podcast, is that the same thing as your social media manager, or is that a separate job? Be crystal clear so that everybody understands what they're supposed to do. Then, I interviewed a guy, Nick Huber, who runs multiple companies. I think if you've heard of him, you've heard of him on Twitter as a Sweaty Startup, I think is his moniker on Twitter. But, he said something to me that really stuck, and it's something that I think I used to do pretty well innately, but I've now refocused on it. And that is you need to create systems and processes that a regular human being, you're not a genius, you just need a regular human being to walk in the door and be successful at that job, right? And so you've got to create the checklists, you've got to create the processes so that things happen the way you want them to happen as the team leader, as the broker, or in my case, as the, whatever I am, president, founder, CEO of Clark Street. And so then you need to decide where that person needs to reside, right? Is it a VA job that I can hire out of Costa Rica or the Philippines or somewhere else? Or is it a person that I need in my office or near my office at least? And then, then it becomes a constant as the broker, as the leader of that team, you need to move from doer, in other words, the person who's actually finding the deals and marshaling those deals through evaluations and ultimately to a purchase. You need to move from that person to the person who becomes the enabler. And so the enabler of that team to be successful, right? So we have a weekly meeting and we don't talk about performance. We don't talk about stats. We talk about what's stressing you out, right? And the reason that I want to know what's stressing people out, and I'm one of those people, right? If it's stressing me out, is because I want to know the reason that it's stressing somebody out is most likely that there's some sort of, human intervention that's required to make that process work. Okay. And then, so can we automate it? Can we outsource it? Can we delegate it? Can we stop doing it? Right. And so we go through that process, and all I'm looking for is, that 1% every week that we're looking at a particular process to improve it just a little bit. Right. Because over the course of doing that 52 times a year, you can significantly improve the effectiveness of an organization. Like you don't even recognize your company a year from now.
I love how you're not necessarily, I mean, you're going to get more productivity and more production out of your staff by doing it this way, but you're almost backing into it a different way. You're not asking, how can you be more productive? How, what kind of things have you accomplished this week? You're actually asking, what are the pain points in their position, how you can make it better? You're probably going to have less turnover. You're going to have happier, more productive staff. I mean, that's an awesome way of looking at it.
And the thing is that, it's not easy to work for our company. Like, we run you through a pretty rigorous interview process. So by the time we extend an offer, we know we have the right human, right? So now it's just a matter of how do we make him or her successful in the job that we're hiring them for? Because, in my career, 20, however many years, well, it might be 30 at this point. It is 30 at this point. Most of the time where we've been in a position to have to let someone go, it's almost always because that the organization has let them down in some way, shape, or form. The training wasn't sufficient. The oversight and accountability wasn't sufficient. I didn't do my job, or, a member of our team didn't do their job to make that process as simple as possible so they could just focus on the thing that they were hired to do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people spend so much time spinning wheels trying to do something that either isn't really their job, but they're doing it because someone else is dropping the ball, or They're doing it because, they're throwing time at it because there's no system around it. So they're muscling their way through something, and it's a waste of time. Just put a system in place.
Yeah. Easy peasy. So I find that a lot of business owners get really stuck on creating SOPs, whether they just don't like doing it or they get overwhelmed. And SOPs just don't sound fun in general, right? They sound so nerdy, and just most people like going out there and doing their investments and selling real estate. But really, it comes down to that's how you're going to build a business. So where would you tell someone to start if they're going to start working on those?
So when we create a job, I don't do standard operating procedures. I just create a checklist. This is the job. Here are the 3 things you're responsible for. Here's how I want them done. You do this, then this, then this, then this. If you have a better idea, let's talk about it. Because invariably, I don't care if it's done my way. I just care that it's right.
Yeah.
And so what I do is then I have the person who's being hired. They're the one that creates a standard operating procedure. So I have a template that I'll use, and I'll give it to them. And I'll say, okay, within the context of this checklist that I've given you, so it's usually a checklist and a video. Here's how I want it. Here's the context. And that the reason I do a video is because they can go back and it becomes a reference point for them.
Yeah.
We do live training as well. And we're a small company. We're 9-10 people. So, I always have time if somebody needs me, right?
Yeah.
But the fact is that I want to give them those reference points so that they can fly on their own. And so when we do that, and then we empower them to say, okay, now I want you to create the standard operating procedure around that, so that if you take 3 days off, your colleague Janice can step in and do your job and cover for you while you're out, right?
Yeah.
And so then we store all those in teams, and they're organized by team, like our sub teams, and then the jobs. Simple.
Amazing. So it's so simple, but so many people get stuck on. I mean, that's actually similar to how we do it at Stats. And I'm always telling the team, I want SOPs for every single thing. I have training, looms, whatever that looks like, for every task you work on. Not because I'm planning on getting rid of you, but because I'd either like to promote you or let you take a week off and you don't actually have to worry about your role. It's completely handled. And they're like, oh, wait, that's an option? I'm like, yes, it's an option. Like, you should be able to take some time off. But I think a lot of us in real estate, don't experience that sometimes, where they think, oh, I've got to get it all done before I go, or I'm going to have this backlog of work when I get back.
Right.
So
last April, I woke up one day and I thought I'd taken my daughter to sushi, and I woke up like middle of the night. Ooh, I don't feel that well. I thought, oh man, it's a shame if I can't go to my favorite sushi restaurant anymore. It turns out I had appendicitis, not food poisoning.
Oh my gosh.
And
yeah.
Fast forward, I'm gone for a week. It ruptured later that morning, and I had surgery, and I was fine. Everything's fine. I was gone for 7 or 8 days, and I fully expected to walk into a nightmare of, okay, where are the fires burning and what do I got to fix? Right. And I walked in, and all the vendors have been paid. All the work orders have been fulfilled. All the residents had paid their rent. All the partners had gotten what they needed. Everybody was humming along. There were a couple things that I had to do that were mine only kind of things, but even those were communicated like, hey, Ed's recuperating and he'll be back Tuesday. So, and I was like, oh my God, they don't need me anymore.
Oh no.
That was both a really cool feeling and a really like, maybe I did this too well.
Yeah.
But I can go on vacation. I was at, a conference last week, and instead of going out for Thursday, Friday, my wife and youngest daughter came with me, and we spent the whole week out there and had a blast, and I didn't work and came back Monday and everything was fine. So
it's crazy.
Nice.
It is really nice, but sometimes, I mean, we're kind of at that point with Stats where things run without me, and it gives you this weird feeling inside. You're like, man, I've always been the one kind of like pulling the strings and doing the thing, and it's bigger than me now, which is the point of building a company, right? It's so awesome.
Mission accomplished. Well done.
Right? Okay, last question.
Sure.
What do you feel like your superpower is?
So I did a tweet. I made a tweet like 2 weeks ago, and it said it had a very difficult conversation with a really good friend of mine. And she was going through a very hard time with her business. And she's like, I think I'm cooked. And I'm like, okay, let's work through this. let's figure out how bad this really is. And without getting into her thing, because that's between her and her business. But so next morning I wrote tweets that I'm a Highlander, right? And I chronicled all the things that have happened to me over the last 15, 20 years. I've had some medical issues. I've had like the appendix. I've had some businesses go sideways on me, and each and every situation I survived, right? And so the premise is, if you ever saw the movie Highlander, is I can't be killed, right? I'm immortal.
Yeah.
And the reason that I fundamentally believe that is that I saw, familiar with Tom Bilyeu?
Mm-mm.
So he's Impact Theory, founder of Quest bars, the protein bars.
Okay.
Companies, but he's got this podcast called Impact Theory, which is amazing if you haven't listened to it. But I saw him speak 2 weeks ago, and one of the things that he did is similar to what I do, and that is he opened the conversation with, ladies and gentlemen, you are in the middle of a biological experience, and understand what that means, right? And he explained it. He said, look, all the feelings you have, all the anxieties you have, the depressive feelings, the positive feelings, everything that you're experiencing right now is dopamine, cortisol, and all the other chemicals firing off in your brain. None of it's real, right? The only thing that's real is that you are in the moment you're in. Everything else is perceiving that moment. And one of the other things he said, which really was, I thought, profound, was, the human experience, right? The things that we see, we see in the electromagnetic spectrum, of light, right? We see 0.00035% of all the stuff that's going on, which means 99 point whatever percent we don't even see, right?
Yeah.
So the lesson there is you can't possibly know all the other stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
So understand that anxiety, that stress, that depression, or that, that thing that just happened to you, take a breath. Because is it a 2-minute problem? Is it a 2-day problem? Is it a 1-year problem? Is it a really, really big, oh my God, we're going down problem?
Yeah.
No matter what, first off, understand it is what it is, right? And breathe through that biological experience of all those chemicals firing, because none of it's real, right? The only thing that's real is where you are in that moment and what you're going to do about it. And he was talking about how to become unstoppable. And I think I had learned that from some of my mentors, and kind of wired that way anyway, being a Highlander. And, you see a lot of people wrap themselves, their identities around their businesses or their families or, other things in their lives. And yes, that's real. Being a father is real. Being a husband is real. But the emotion that comes with it isn't. And as soon as you understand that, you can process it differently so that you can go, oh my God, that just happened. Okay. All right, that just happened. I know what's going on in here. All right, now what do we do? How do we take that breath? How do we work the problem? How do we work that situation? Because so my superpower is this. When the world spins really, really fast, for whatever reason, I can make it slow down. And that's why.
I mean, that's amazing. I feel like, especially because of our listeners are almost all business owners, right? And sometimes we do identify as just being our business owner, the business we're running, right? We get excited by it. I mean, I know I do for sure. There's different days that I'm on like a high because we're doing really well. And then all of a sudden something goes awry and I feel a little bit wonky that day, but definitely like breathing through it and remembering probably why you're doing it is going to make you feel better too. And not getting so stuck on these little sometimes they're not, but generally they're little minute things that can be fixed.
Yeah. Almost everything can be fixed, right? I mean, I've lost a multi-million-dollar consulting firm because my partner and I didn't get along, and it got really, really ugly, and I prevailed, thank God. But, the fact is that, because I was right, but the fact is that those 2 years they were terrible, right? They were awful. And I wish I knew then what I knew right after that, which is I can't be killed. Like, I got through that. My wife and I got through that. My kids got through that. Business-wise, the next day I was fine, right?
Yeah.
And so that was like, that guy lived rent free in my head for 2 years. Right. And
Yeah.
then he was gone. And I was the same human being. My kids still thought I was 8 feet tall. My wife still liked me. I still liked her. Right. My family was still my family. My friends were still my friends. And none of all that crap that had happened mattered at all. Right. And so you just have to recognize that the feelings that you're having in that moment,
Yeah.
when the proverbial stuff hits the fan,
Yeah.
that's all they are. It's feelings. They're not real. So
That's
experience them, let them go, work through them in that however much time you need, and then work the problem. Right.
I love that superpower. That's just good because I think all of us can kind of learn from that and eventually work towards doing something, even on a little minute scale of just kind of letting things go a little bit more. Ed, this has been amazing learning from you and all of your various experience. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, where should they reach out?
So there's probably two best places to get a hold of me. One is you can go to our website, clarkst.com, clarkstreet.com. You can also listen to our podcast, which we publish every Tuesday afternoon, and that's called Real Estate Underground. So we talk about all this stuff.
Amazing. Well, thanks for joining us and have a great day.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Bye.
Bye.